So back in the late 2000s under Tony Pulis, Stoke City had probably one of the most unstoppable and unique attacking weapons that football has ever seen, and that was Rory Delap's long throw-in. And it was a tactic that was so feared by opposition sides that teams would actually resort to kicking the ball out for a corner rather than giving away a throw-in in the defensive third. And it led to Stoke scoring 9 times from Rory Delap throw-ins in their first season in the Premier League in 2008-2009. And the formula was simple: Delap on the throw-in, the bigger lads in the box, Ricardo Fuller, Seyi Olafinyana, Mamadi Sidibe, Abdoulaye and Amdi Faye and Ryan Shawcross. Delap hurls the ball in, you have Ricardo Fuller pinning the defenders in front of the goalkeeper and a couple 6-foot+ Senegalese lads running towards the 6-yard box. And nearly 20 years on, no one's been able to replicate this sort of hack in the footballing matrix. The glitch may have been patched, or maybe no one can just throw a ball like Rory Delap that flat with that much power. However, what if there was another method of creating high value chances but from open play that Ruben Amorim's Manchester United could use next season? What players would need to be signed and how would you tactically set it up? Well, before I break that down, a quick reminder: if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to Dragon Jersey. They've got a variety of different current season and retro jerseys, including Manchester United shirts going all the way back to the early 90s. Depending on where you live, you can get 7 to 12 day delivery time, as well as a 30-day money back guarantee. But if you want to check out any of the details before you buy, they have got their WhatsApp and email on the site. If you use code Atlantis at checkout, you will get a 10% discount, so I'll leave it linked in the description and in the comments section below. So what is this Rory Delap-esque method that I'm suggesting? Well, let me first break down my thought process and the problem that this tactic would solve. So what is the biggest issue that Manchester United and other top sides are facing in the Premier League this season? Well, in my personal opinion, it's that opposition sides have now realised that the optimal way of defending against positional play, Guardiola-inspired systems that we see from pretty much most of the top sides is just to drop off deep and sit incredibly compact in either a 5-4-1, a 5-3-2, a 4-4-2 or a 4-5-1, with the wide midfielders sitting very narrow as if they're wide central midfielders, in order to compact the space between the lines and congest the centre of the pitch and stop the opposition's most creative players from being able to receive the ball in space in central positions and influence the game from that area. For a while, sides were taking influence from Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp, looking to press aggressively high up the pitch with the aim of using a counter-pressing strategy in order to win the ball back and then attack into the space that is available, with the space being maximised because the opposition can't transition from their possession shape to their defensive shape in time, and so there's greater space between individual players. However, the issue with this was that after De Zerbi came to the Premier League and started not just trying to play out of pressure, but actively trying to bait the press in order to then play through the centre of the pressure and in behind the midfield line, taking advantage of the space between the opposition's defensive and midfield lines in what has become known as an artificial counter-attack. And so opposition sides realised that the risk of vacating the space between their midfield and defensive lines was not worth the potential benefit of winning the ball high up the pitch. And so this is why Manchester United seems so much better offensively against the top sides who press them aggressively, compared to the supposed weaker sides individually like Forest, Palace or Fulham, who aren't as concerned with pressing high and aggressively and are instead happy to sit deeper and more compact. And so due to most of the top sides, including Ruben Amorim's United, using a strict positional play strategy where players are instructed to hold positions in certain areas, compared with a more relationist approach like Fernando Diniz or Ancelotti, where players are given a lot more freedom in possession, it becomes hard for sides like Manchester United, City and Chelsea as well to use coordinated patterns of play in order to play through these defensive shapes, because of how congested the centre of the pitch is. And because of how strict the positional play setup is, the individual creativity of the players becomes stifled and the attack of top sides becomes a lot less effective as a whole. So how do you go about dealing with this issue? Well, if sides are going to sit deep and compact, restrict space in behind the back line and between the lines centrally, the trade-off of this is that they're going to have to vacate space out wide. And so just logically, if the opposition are sitting deep and the space is out wide, crossing situations should be the approach that teams look to take in order to consistently create chances. And so my theory is that if you have crossing specialists on either side and a significant aerial threat inside of the box, now the opposition side sitting deeper and narrower actually plays into your hands. So you know how Arsenal got really good at corners earlier on in the season, and then proceeded to use it as some sort of glitch in the game that hadn't been patched, well, you could do the same thing but from open play crossing positions, probably to an even higher volume than with set pieces, purely because it's far easier to work crossing situations throughout the course of a game than it is to win offensive set pieces. But it isn't just as simple as telling your wide players to put in more early crosses. You need the right profile of players, but also the right patterns of play in order to create the most optimal crossing angles. In terms of player profiles, I think Dwight McNeil and Victor Osimhen are perfect for this. Osimhen and Gyökeres are probably the only elite level centre forwards on the market in the summer, and Osimhen has a release clause of just under £60 million. Add on to this the fact that we have Højlund, who Conte, the manager of Napoli, apparently likes, and we also need to sell Højlund for around £38.5 million in order to avoid a loss on the books, and considering that Osimhen at £38 million is probably slightly overpriced as well, given that Napoli don't have much leverage considering the fallout last summer, alongside the fact that Osimhen has just 1 year left on his current contract come June, and I think this is the perfect deal for United. So alongside a striker like Osimhen, I think Dwight McNeil is the exact profile of wingback that we should be targeting. We already have Dorgu, who is 20 years old, so Dwight McNeil being 25, 26 throughout the start of next season is probably the optimal age. We can't just pack the squad full of players between the age of 19 and 22 and expect the level of consistency of someone like Dwight McNeil, who has been impressing in the Premier League for almost half a decade now, undergoing a steady but consistent improvement year on year, and he's done it at 2 different clubs, and he's still impressing at a club like Everton, who year on year seem to be in a relegation fight. But what has really impressed me about McNeil isn't just that he's a hard-working winger with a good cross. When he's able to float into central areas between the lines, he has the turn of pace to be able to allow the ball to roll across his body before driving forward, and rather surprisingly, his timing and weight of pass when the opportunity is there for a through ball is pretty insane for how highly he's currently rated. Obviously, his crossing ability is what has sold me on him, but you also can't underestimate the value of his versatility. In terms of being a crossing threat, he can do this from either side, whilst also having a variety of different crosses in his locker, and his volume and consistency of output when it comes to his crosses is probably only bettered by the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold and maybe James Ward-Prowse, and that's factoring in set pieces as well. Left back when Amad is playing at right wing back, but if Amad isn't playing or he's playing further forward in the front three, or maybe in a midfield three, then McNeil can be shifted to the right, where his crosses are equally, if not more effective, because they are in-swingers, which then allows Dorgu to come in at left wing back. But let's say that Mainu is injured, Bruno Fernandes needs a rest midway through next season, purely because of how many games he played over the last few years, and a new signing like Ederson is suspended. Then Amorim could bring Dwight McNeil into the side as an interior forward either side of the centre forward in a 3-4-3, or on either side of a midfield three with one of Agate and Kone on the right, and the other sitting in between in the centre in more of a 3-5-2 that becomes a diamond midfield when Xerxes drops off from the forward line. And whilst this may be seen as kind of a stopgap solution, I think if Amorim were to find McNeil the right role in a particular system from a central position, he could offer something that even Bruno Fernandes doesn't possess, and that is athletic ball carrying ability through the centre. See, despite all the qualities Bruno Fernandes has, you certainly wouldn't describe him as an athletic ball carrier. Now, someone like Ederson would bring this in abundance to United's midfield, but even with him on the pitch, United still need a few more players who can transition the attack quickly by carrying the ball through the centre of the pitch into open space after a turnover, or when playing out of aggressive pressure, and I think Dwight McNeil could provide this. Alongside this, he's also shown he has the capabilities to score from distance spectacularly, which would give Amorim another player who is capable of turning a game on their own, which does come in clutch throughout a season. But in comparison to his long distance efforts, a partnership with Osimhen and McNeil would be far more lucrative for Amorim on a consistent basis, and it's not just when McNeil's playing as a wing back, as in just a minute I'm going to explain how Amorim could create certain patterns of play that allow McNeil to pull wider and get into positions and create angles where he can put in swinging or out swinging crosses even from a central midfield position. But from the left as a left wing back is where I think McNeil will predominantly play, ahead of or just as an alternative to Dorgu, with Amad or maybe even Bendito Mentato, or Dalot maybe if he isn't sold, on the right. So with these two signings in the side, Dwight McNeil and Victor Osimhen, what patterns of play can we look to set up in order to get McNeil into optimal crossing positions? So in the middle third is not just as simple as playing the ball wide to McNeil and having him try to find Osimhen, as if we go directly from the left-sided centre-back into McNeil on the left flank, he's receiving the ball far too deep, which allows the opposition's right back to steadily shift over to that side, pushing up to apply pressure whilst the backline squeezes up the pitch in order to keep Osimhen outside of the box. And so what I think is a more optimal pattern of play in order to set up a crossing opportunity is to first look to work the ball down the right side, forcing the opposition's defensive shape to shift across to that side, creating space on the far left side where McNeil can push further forward so that he can receive the ball in a more advanced position from a direct switch of play, whilst also being in a greater amount of space, with the fullback having to cover a larger amount of distance in order to get over to him. Now after receiving possession, if McNeil has the opportunity, he can race forward into the space and look to get into a crossing position himself. But if the opposition's fullback is quick to get over, or McNeil just has to slow down the pace of the attack in order to allow Osimhen to get into a optimal position in the centre, this is where the player on McNeil's inside in the left-sided half space, Kobbie Mainoo in this example, can look to pull out wide and provide an overlapping run, not necessarily to receive a pass down the side of the fullback, but to create a 2v1, with the opposition's right-sided centre-back unable to follow him, and follow his run directly, working to drag the opposition's fullback deeper, creating space for McNeil to then get the ball out of his feet and look to put in an in-swinging cross to find Osimhen. But even if he wasn't being used as a left wing back and instead was being used in central midfield or as an interior forward from the left side, McNeil can still get into crossing positions using this attacking pattern of play. But rather than being the player to hold a wide position on the flank, using the overlap to create space for a cross from a deep position, instead McNeil can be the player providing the overlap from the half space, ahead of the left wing back Dorgu, looking to receive a pass down the outside of the fullback and look to put in a cross closer to the byline, with Osimhen once again the target in the box. And so whether the cross is coming from a deeper position, even against organised, deep and compact defensive shapes. So let me know what you think of the Osimhen-McNeil partnership in the comment section below, and if you do want to check out any cheap good quality football jerseys, go over to Dragon Jersey. I'll leave it linked in the description and comment section below. You can use code Alandis at checkout for a 10% discount, and if you want to sign up to my Patreon to read any of my articles, I'll leave that linked on the end screen now as well.